people and ideas together to advance research, technology, commercialization, incubation, and economic development. Partners in the district will collaborate with university faculty, researchers, and students from a variety of fields with access to many campus facilities and amenities. At full capacity, the district will encompass 24 acres with 500,000 square feet of tech, light industrial office, commercial, experiential retail, and multi-purpose event and performing arts space, as well as workforce housing. Adam is the executive director of OSU Innovation CoLab, and then he'll also be introducing Jared Pentilla, who is the associate director of capital planning and construction at OSU Cascades. So please welcome Adam and Jared.
Thank you for having us today. So we are stepping into a new world of innovation that we've never seen. Just last month, there was announcements about Neuralink doing FDA trials. It's basically brain mesh that will connect to people's spinal cord and help them walk again, and also blind people to see. There are things like ChatGPT launched, which is the first artificial intelligence that will just answer your questions. So imagine going to like a website like Google and typing in a prompt, and it'll spit out an entire essay. I don't know how we're going to grade papers ever again. And if you haven't experimented with it, it's free. You can play with it online. And then we have other things that have happened in the last month. There was a young woman, it was a teenage girl that was just cured of T-cell-based leukemia through DNA editing. It's the first time they've ever done that. And with mRNA and everything else, the world is changing. It's difficult to remember these things, or hard to see them, given the news cycles and everything with COVID the last couple of years. But the world is quite amazing when it comes to technology. But the problem is, it's not amazing for everyone, right? We have problems with housing. We need childcare, we need transportation, we have healthcare issues. We have to be able to take care of our young population, our aging population. We need new educational models. And things seem to get more expensive when they're really difficult problems. And so, more than ever, we need the next generation of innovators, and we need innovators. We need innovators to be able to work on these things, build new things, and adjust to the workforce changes of tomorrow, right? Because if the world's changing, the jobs that are defined today, they're going to be way different in the future. Generative AI in the things what ChatGPT and these imaging technologies, graphic artists and copywriters are going to be impacted. Marketers are going to be impacted. We are going to have to shift. So our students, our workforce, we're going to have to be able to educate them for tomorrow. At the same time, we have to be able to solve the problems of today. And we have to be able to build cool things, processes, ideas, methods to help them address them. And so what I'm here to talk to you about today is some of the things that OSU Cascades is doing in order to be innovative and train the next generation of the workforce while serving the community here at OSU and near OSU Cascades in the region. So these are a couple of the things that OSU Cascades is working on with regard to innovation. I'll just hit some main points here. So next fall, we're launching an innovation and entrepreneurship option for our students. We just went through a big hiring process, and we're our first PhD hire for running that program. And so we're going to teach our students and also be able to offer those classes publicly as well. The next thing that we have is Cascades Edge. And I don't know if you've heard about Cascades Edge, but it's a program that we explored what students and families wanted for about 2 years. And we found that students, when they get to college, they want the ability to explore, find a career that they love, and be able to get there from whatever education they're getting. They also want to find community from day one. And they also want to know that they're going to get a return on their investment, because college can be expensive. And so we built a program in order to, from day one at OSU Cascades, people can find their community of other like-minded people, whether it's sustainability or innovation. And then we have other things that are going along with that, with like career training and workshops. And we're really trying to help people find their path. So Cascades Edge is a larger initiative to help students from day one. Then we have our internships and capstone programs. Internships, we go out and work, at the local locations for businesses, nonprofits, and government. But capstones are more big projects, and if you're interested in learning about these types of year-long projects that students do, I'm happy to talk more about that. Other things that we have is we have a makerspace on campus, which allows students to learn about how to build things, and in the future we'll expand the operations so that people can prototype and do things here in the local community. We also have we have faculty research, and we, some examples, or one of my favorite example is we have somebody that's exploring removal of waste from fracking water and runoff, and he just got, what was it, 2 million, 5 million? 2 million for that project in order to build technology that can do that type of cleanup. Then I run the Innovation Co-Lab, which the Innovation Co-Lab, what we do is I coach early stage nonprofits and as well as startups. And I also help existing businesses build products and services. So if you're launching something new, what I do is I help people plan for whatever that is. It might be a mobile app, it might be a service-based business. Through one of our collaborations here with Opportunity Knocks, we started a food truck, and that one's outside the Brown Owl, Lucky's Woodsman, really great food. And so I help people start new things. At the same time, I have interns join in on the phone. And what they do, they're student workers, they get paid, because I believe that people should be paid for work. And what they do is they help us build business plans, or mobile apps, websites, all different number of things. So our tagline is that we help the innovators of today while training the innovators of tomorrow. And so I'm happy to talk more about that after we talk about the innovation district as well. Then we have this bigger initiative here locally with about 30 organizations and a lot of the local economic development folks called the Innovation Hub. This is a grant from Business Oregon and Oregon Innovation Council to build a stronger hub here locally, which we have a number of programs that run kind of in parallel. And there's a lot of things that we do, but we're not being deliberate about what we run for the community. So there's a number of how to create your startup classes here locally. But entrepreneurs might we need to figure out we need to be able to find a bookkeeper. Or they might be like, well, I built my website back in 2015, I want to know how I can build something better for today. How do I use this next generation of tools, right? So the Innovation Hub is a year-long business planning process that we're approaching the last 6 months of it, where we're putting together the plan for how these entities are going to work together and to better serve our entrepreneurs, especially those from underrepresented or rural backgrounds, because they're not getting access to these things to the level that we want. And the state's going to create, I think, 16 of these hubs across the state, and we're hoping to be one of them. And then we have the Innovation District, which we're going to talk more about today. So OSU Cascades was born out of the community to serve the community. And so we take that approach to any number of things that we do here. So for our academic programs, we have a curriculum committee that met regularly to make sure that our academic programs were aligned with what the workforce needs were here. We had a number of studies and found things like nobody needs a ceramics degree, but we do need healthcare workers. And so out of that, we just launched our new biomedical and molecular bioscience program that's an undergraduate degree. And we have made sure that our programs are matching up as much as possible with the local workforce need. And then we also are building spaces and programs to support that. We're not a 150-year-old institution. We might be a land-grant institution, but we have the advantage of being a startup and moving quickly and building new things. And so building them for the modern day. So when we build these spaces, we are really trying to get the community's feedback on what this space, what these programs, what's going to best serve the community. And Jared will talk more about how the processes have worked to incorporate that feedback, and we'll be asking feedback from you as well. But some of the things that we're thinking about as we build this campus. Art galleries, we're thinking about industry space, incubator space, having economic support agencies all in the same place. Thinking about, what can we do culturally from our campus to support the community? Events and conference center, performing arts centers, that kind of thing. And we're truly trying to build something that is relevant for what the community needs, because we're born out of the community. So we're building an innovation district. You've heard this word a couple of times. And what is an innovation district? Well, if you think about the way that we did placemaking in the past, what we would build is we'd build a skunk works or an industry, corporate industrial park, and it'd be on the outskirts of town. Or you'd build economic clusters, right? Try to get everybody in the same area. Well, what we realized from economic development for years is that those models aren't fit necessarily for the community. It's built way out from everybody. It's not connected to transportation. It's not walkable. It doesn't have things like housing, which is a major need here. And so these old models, they're not integrated into the community. And from the time that we had our master plan approved, this has been the plan. We're going to build something that's flexible to the needs of the community. And so what we're doing is we're copying, well, not copying exactly, we're building the relevant model for us. But we're looking at these other innovation districts, and we've done a number of long-term plans and worked with a number of consultants to plan out what our district's going to be. And there's a number of these across the country, and they can be right-sized to the size of the institution. And so while you might have one at MIT, there's smaller ones across the country in small towns and places that you would never imagine. I was talking to somebody, they call theirs an innovation hub out in Ohio from Shawnee State University in Ohio. They have one of these, and they're starting with one building. We have the ability to build something really great, almost like an old mill for innovation here in this community that serves the community. So what are the impacts of innovation districts? They create jobs, and so they employ more than 300,000 people, and what they find is that for every job on the innovation district, it creates 2.57 industry jobs. It's a place where you can grow, and it's high wage jobs. It's things that people can afford the cost of living, and it raises the bar for other businesses here. And Jared's going to give you some more flavor as to what this actually looks like. Some additional impacts. So basically, you're not just focusing on one sector. You're not just focusing on one part of industry or one government entity. This is something that's integrated, and it creates collisions among people. And when you do that, amazing things happen, as long as you can support them. So things like, we can catalyze faculty research and intellectual property development, but we can also support companies that are trying to do the same thing. They need a prototype lab, they need assistance, they need to find funding. And so we can build those types of programs into the district. We also are really focused on aligning students who are going to be tomorrow's workforce with industry. And so by having the close proximity to the educational institution, students are there, industry's there. You can get access to those students to come and work for your company or government initiative or whatever it might be, and it creates those collisions. So it creates new opportunities for training, but also creates basically a way to find talent for your company, which is a major problem, is filling positions right now. And then the other things that we have are, it provides the community with the resources. I need a prototype, but it also provides cultural space, walkable space, space for things that we couldn't otherwise do in this community. If we wanted larger events and conferences center or something of the sort, then how are we going to make that work? Or if we wanted to bring in a big company that wants to create a regional office, we can have space for that. So this entire thing, this entire innovation district model is adaptable, it's flexible, and it's flexible to the feedback that you give. It's flexible to what we need here in the community. That's the difference with innovation districts. It's not a research park that only university faculty can use. It's for the community. and it's something that we all belong to. That said, I'm going to introduce Jared, who's the Associate Director for Capital Planning and Construction. And Jared won't brag about himself, so I will. Jared has about 20 years of experience with building major facilities for, especially for silicon chips and Intel and Micron, and he came from the background of building big manufacturing type facilities and equipment, and so he can manage this process and talk about how we're actually going to do this better than anybody I know. So, Jared.
Can you guys hear me okay without the mic? Turn it off for now. Can you guys? Okay. Is it okay if I speak up? Is that okay? Or I'm happy to turn it on. Just let me know if it's easier. We'll just go with that. Is that better? Okay. So yeah, Adam's right. I'm not really good at talking about myself, especially as an introvert. And I tend to kind of talk through these things as a more a conversation. So if you guys have questions on the way, definitely raise your hand or get my attention. So OSU Cascades, as you guys have seen over the past couple of years, if you've driven up and down Chandler, we're really taking on a relatively bold plan to turn a blighted landscape that has been in the community for years and relatively hidden by trees and a berm, and turning that blighted landscape into a local community and a regional asset. I think a lot of folks recognize this image or may recognize this image. This is what the Pumice Mine looked like before we really got to it, and this is where we're headed to as you think about that space now. For those of you who've gone down Chandler and seen where we're headed, you see that big oval green in the middle. That's what you see here in the middle. So eventually there will be buildings all around the outside of that. So, you know, just kind of looking back in time a little bit. So we really started this process in 2015 with the 10-acre campus and started to build those 3 buildings that exist in the 10-acre campus. And then while that effort was going on, OSU Cascades was also working on the master plan and thinking about the ways to approach the 10-acre campus and perhaps, if things worked out, the rest of that larger space. That included doing a lot of community feedback, stakeholder feedback. There's a number of individuals from the community and community members that were invited to come in and provide thoughts and feedback. And not all that feedback was positive. I think there was definitely a lot of thought around parking and feedback of transportation and where's the right site, how does it fit? And in the end, I think the opportunity to transform this blighted landscape and be in the heart of Bend was really a piece that helped make the decision to move forward in this particular location. And now that we're there, I think I've spoken with folks as we've gone through the first section of this remediation process, and I've heard a number of different pieces of feedback. Some of that is, I was opposed to you guys being here. I see what you're doing now, and at least it looks nice. You're turning something into something as a positive community asset. I'm still not thrilled, but you're heading in a good direction. And I've also heard people come by and say, this is tremendous, and I'm so excited that I can walk through this today. And so I hope over time, as Adam discussed, and as you hear me over the years, our efforts to listen to the community shine through and help to warn more people over. We're really trying hard to get it right. Not every single thing's going to be right all the time, but hopefully the effort is showing. And so, kind of talking through this, you'll see me bring up this image a few times. You can see my green pointer. So, this is that oval green. Here's Chandler coming up. So you can see all the buildings. How many of you guys have seen this before? A couple? Slightly recognize, okay, maybe the news. And so, generally speaking, the campus is broken into districts. There's an idea around breaking this into this core around the oval green that is mostly educational. That's where the academic buildings are. This is where students can go relatively quickly from one class to another, from one building to another. There's a couple of residential buildings around that core to kind of spread folks out around there. And then there's a recreational district in this northwest corner. includes this large recreational building here. There's more residential area as you move up towards Mount Washington and Broken Top. And then there's, this is typically the Innovation District area over here. Now, when we talk about the Innovation District, I think, Adam brings up a lot of good points of what typical innovation districts look like around the country, and then also, kind of what we're looking at for this one. And I think it's important to highlight that this innovation district has on the order of like 1 million square feet of space in like 12 buildings. And when you think about that, you go, wow, that's a ton of space. What are we going to do with all that? What are they going to bring in here? And what's important to think about is that's broken up into a lot of different uses. So, one of those uses is a performing arts center. One of those uses is some residential buildings, some middle market or workforce housing. And so that space breaks up into a lot of smaller buckets that when you start to look at them and consume them, you say, well, that's actually relatively reasonable. There's some coffee shops, and there's some small retail shops and things that bring the community in. We'll talk more about that in future, couple future slides, but just want to maybe break up the innovation district. It's such an obscure term that I think often people get, what is an innovation district? Why are you doing this? So we'll talk a little more about that. So standing on the 10-acre campus, looking at the 3 existing buildings in our parking lot, if you looked north, this is a cut of that. You can kind of see, you can barely see it here. So this is that master plan. Here's the existing campus over down here. If you're looking north, this is what that would look like. So you see what we call a bowstring green here, a large open park-like space between the buildings. Maybe you can imagine a farmer's market going on here. You can imagine a small bodega or grocery store in one of these small buildings over here, a coffee shop, maybe a small delicatessen. We're trying to bring the community in and make it an activated space that folks are walking their dog through, folks are pushing a stroller through, but also folks are moving from the residential building off to the right here over where they live over to the coffee shop to get coffee, and then upstairs into the office building where they're doing some software programming. So it's a place where people live and work and learn. Yeah.
Sorry, you may have already said this, I'm sorry if I didn't hear it, but what is the ETA on, when is all this expected to be completed?
We'll go through that in a future slide. And so sustainability has been an important aspect of what we're chasing here on the OSU Cascades campus. We just went through in 2020 an energy study that looked at how we can reach net zero energy for our campus. So that's everything that you see in that master plan. And so with that effort, we end up having a groundwater well that pulls water out of the aquifer. This is really similar to what happens up at into the 7th Mountain. They have the same system, and relatively speaking, we basically copied them. It's not that innovative and amazing, but it's just something that we can do here in Central Oregon because of us having an amazingly clean aquifer. So that water comes out of the aquifer. We at about 50 degrees, and to heat and cool our buildings, all the buildings on campus as we build those, we can actually just take about 5 degrees off of that. So we'll put it back into the ground at 45 degrees, or we'll actually put 5 degrees into that in the summertime. So we'll put it back in the ground at about 55 degrees. So we don't change the water anyway. It runs through extremely clean system as it comes out of the water, comes out of the ground and goes through our system and back into the ground. So we're not changing the water anyway. Just taking a little bit of heat off of it or putting a little bit of heat into it. Yeah.
Drinking water? Where do you get that?
So all the drinking water for the campus is supplied by the city of Bend. So it's the same water everybody else in Bend drinks. And so that heating and cooling system is a relatively dramatic, as I say, it's nothing that innovative, nothing that amazing, nothing groundbreaking there, but it's a very dramatic change in our energy signature for the campus that drastically reduces our energy consumption. So a lot of folks have a heat pump outside their house. This is the same technology, the heat pump. We're just, instead of having outside air for the heat pump, we're using water. And so we can heat and cool all those buildings highly efficiently because of that. So as we build out the campus, we'll continue to head down that path. Because of that difference in how we use the energy and how we heat and cool our buildings, we can then much more easily achieve a path where the solar that we can put on each building provides enough electricity annually to offset the energy use of that building. So as we build out the campus, right now there's no solar on our buildings. We've been waiting for us to have enough buildings on campus where we can do a whole bunch of it at once. We get better economy of scale and better cost that way. And so we're approaching that first phase of installing solar on our buildings. Additionally, you brought up the water, so we did a net zero water study to understand how we can achieve net zero water for our campus, because water use is an important thing in our region. We are looking at over the next 10 years, as we grow, there'll be a point where we have enough water use where we can then guide all of our effluent water down to a water reclamation facility and then clean that water and reuse it for things like irrigation on the campus. You'll notice most of the campus has a high desert landscape feel, kind of like we see out here. It is not grassy greens like you see in Corvallis or like you see at Penn State or other colleges. It is just that oval green in the center to provide kind of a play area and a relatively common feel for students. But most of the rest of the campus is intended to be a high desert landscape that doesn't require watering all year. We'll do some initial watering for establishment to get things growing, and then we'll turn the water off on those areas, and they will just be what you get for precipitation. So this is another section view of the campus. This is kind of standing at the oval green in the center of the campus and looking west. I think most folks tend to recognize this little outcropping right here, which is the stone outcropping or the pumice outcropping that's on campus today that you see at the west end. So we intend to save that long term. There was a lot of feedback from the community that was an important aspect of the campus and the history of the site. And so we intend to save that long term and keep it there. There's a beautiful view from up there. If you park off Mount Washington and you walk, there's some trails that go through a wooded area, and that wooded area will stay there long term. There's actually that area of special interest up there, and there's a beautiful view from that point up there. So the design guidelines for the campus, we're setting up standards for our campus such that as each of the future buildings go through their design process, that they all communicate with each other with an architectural language that I think matches a lot of what you see in the Central Oregon Bend area, but also brings in a little bit different taste to it. You probably see a little bit of that on our campus today, and we plan to continue that language in general. So next, we're going to work on an innovation district. So again, we're kind of circling and highlighting where that innovation district is out of the overall master plan. The first section of that innovation district, actually I'm going to back up a little bit. So before we can build that innovation district, we need to clean up that land. That land is currently a landfill. It's a construction and demolition landfill. So historically, this was sawdust from the mills, drop off cut ends from the mills, actually parts of machinery from the mills. And then on the weekends, there's also construction and demolition also involves roofing from people's houses, carpeting from people's houses. So if anything was demoed around the area, people would bring it there. So there's a number of different types of things in there. One of the things to really highlight is that it is not a standard municipal landfill. So standard municipal landfill by definition can handle, is required to be able to handle a number of different types of waste. And this was not certified as that type of landfill. So there's a lot fewer dangerous things to come across in there. The biggest dangerous thing that we're going to come across is pyrolysis. A lot of folks in the Bend area talk about the landfill burning underground. There's no fire underground. It is actually similar to what happens in your compost bin when it gets really hot and it breaks down. That's what's happening underground. There's a whole bunch of sawdust down there, really similar to your compost bin. And it is getting really hot down there. It's also under a lot of pressure just from the weight of the material above it. And so under that pressure, it gets to a really hot temperature. There's actually temperature probes all along the sections where we know of issues. So all along in here, there's temperature probes that go underground. And so Deschutes County and OSU monitor those temperature probes, and we've been monitoring them since the Deschutes County put them in back in 2005, I think it was. And so over the course of those years, those temperatures really peaked in like the 2008 kind of time frame and really came down. And so we're seeing temperatures that are telling us that we don't have a significant risk there as far as that goes. We had a pyrolysis expert come out and do some analysis with us as we get ready to do this first phase of work, so we would understand what that looks like. So this pyrolysis expert, it's interesting to me that a pyrolysis expert is even a thing. This is somebody that landfills, underground burning at landfills is a problem. As lots of types of materials decompose, they get hot, and depending on how they're handled, landfill can have an issue or not. And so, there's a few folks. One of my lessons in this process has been there's not many of these folks. So we have to kind of work to find them. There's a couple folks from the U.S. and Canada who typically travel around the world to go help landfills solve these problems or understand them and study them. We brought one of those folks here, walked around, looked at these areas, looked at the temperatures, and then took samples of the gases that are coming off from underground areas. So those same probes that go deep into the ground for checking the temperature also have tubes that come off of them, so we can do sampling of the gases that are coming off the areas underground. So the outcome from that was we're not seeing a lot of carbon monoxide, which is typically one of the things that comes off of something when it's burning. So we're not seeing the types of chemical reactions that would cause us concern, essentially. And so as we approach the landfill remediation, we're going to take all the waste out of this first section here, and then we're going to separate that waste into the parts of the waste that we can safely reuse. So as that landfill was built, waste was put in there, and then it was covered up with soil. And so there's a lot of reusable soil in that landfill. And so we're going to take that waste out and then run it through what's called trommel and separate that waste into the reusable soil and the waste, and then test all that soil to make sure it doesn't have any contaminants in it. It has to meet DEQ standards for clean fill. Is there a question?
Yeah, how deep are the probes and how deep are you reckoning?
So we are going to go all the way to the bottom until we hit native ground again. So clean, undisturbed native ground. So we will take all the waste out of that hole. So the shallow portion of this, over in this area, is about 30 feet deep. The deepest section along here gets to be about 80 feet deep. And so the exciting part is we really proved this and went through it on this first section here. We took, in the last project, when you saw us having all the earthwork going on over there, we took about 60,000 cubic yards of waste, and we separated that, ran it through a trommel, and separated it into about 26,000 cubic yards of reusable soil, tested all that soil to make sure that it was clean, and then that's actually what makes up the ground under the oval green in the middle. So so we filled that oval green up with actually about 25 feet vertically of that reused, reclaimed soil, and then we put 3 feet of clean fill over the top of it of what, like basically imported from offsite.
So all of this work is being done on the campus, and one of the concerns, 12 years ago now, of the neighbors, was that there would be removal of these materials, so there would be truck traffic going back and forth. So that won't happen?
That's right, yeah. So all of this happens on the campus. So it's one of the exciting parts of having both sides of this, is we're able to use one to remediate the other in both directions. And so we're taking the waste out of here, separating it and getting the reclaimed soil. That reclaimed soil will go down here into the part of the oval, part of the campus that you kind of see the lower depression right now, and help build that up. And then the waste, the stuff that's pure waste, will go over to this top corner to be re-landfilled in perpetuity. And we can ultimately build things like the parking lot that you see off Simpson is built on top of waste, and recreation fields up there. So these are things that we can put about 3 feet of clean imported soil over the top of it, and then that's the cap essentially, and then we can build ball fields and things like that over the top of it. This first section was a great test to make sure, like, our economics, make sure the process, understand it with the DEQ, we took this first section off right here and took it all the way down to native, tested that ground to make sure we were at the bottom, and then tested all the material that came out of it to make sure it was all clean as well. We have a bunch of work to do. This will take about 18 months to 2 years to go do this initial work. And then we can start on our innovation district vertical building. So again, this is kind of that same area you just saw me pointing to, where we're gonna go take it down to the bottom. And you can kind of see how, as you move north, there's more landfill there, there's future phases, right? So this first section is about 8 acres. It's about 250,000 square feet. It might end up being about 300,000 square feet in the end. And it's made up of a couple of different types of uses. So this innovation district, as Adam was discussing, will really be a place where folks can come together from the university, from the private sector, and from the community to come together for lots of different purposes. As we go through this, we'll kind of talk about a couple of different types of uses. So you can see we've kind of numbered the buildings here, given a general size and type of use. I would say this is, when Adam talks about this being flexible, I think that that flexible word can't really be overstated. I think that we give an initial idea here of what these uses are and what types of spaces they are, really just to put some context to this. But I think there's a lot we're going to learn over the next 3 or 4 years while we start to put this together and we listen to the community, we listen to the private industry, we listen to the OSU Cascades and OSU main campus stakeholders to understand how do these things come together in a way that is an environment where folks point to it and say, that's exciting, we're doing this right here. For us to sit here and say, this is exactly how this is going to turn out, I think that would be a little bit too prescriptive, and we're not that smart. There's no way we can get this right without a lot of people involved.
So is this phase 1 that you're talking about right now?
That's right. Yep, so if I go back a slide, so kind of zoomed in, so you take this area here, these are the later phases, so if we take this area right here and zoom into it, that's what we're looking at there.
Performing Arts Center, how does 40,000 square feet compare to like the Health Center? Would you?
I don't have that answer off the top of my head.
Or Newport's Performing Arts Center?
I think it's actually probably a little smaller, I'm guessing, but I'm not certain of the answer.
Smaller than the Health Center?
I think it's smaller than the whole time.
How many seats is that, Jared?
Well, to be honest, we haven't necessarily finalized that.
We haven't finalized
Yeah,
it, but
I think we've kind of talked about it being in the range of like 1,000 or so, but I think it depends on a lot of things. There's a lot of pieces to that and how it comes together to get the true answer. I think what this is really saying is our master plan, as agreed with the city of Bend, has a performing arts center noted in it that is currently slated to be 40,000 square feet. And if we want to change the size of that, then we would have a different type of approval process with the city of Bend. What the specific definition is for that space there, I'd say is relatively vague at this time. And I would say for intentional purposes, like again, not narrowing us into a certain outcome.
I have a question about inclusiveness across the socioeconomic continuum, because Bend has a history of having great living wage logging jobs. And I can see how people who already have businesses, have pretty good education, and are pretty entrepreneurial will be all over these opportunities. But I'm kind of wondering about the people who have less education and are service industry and maybe have entrepreneurial ideas. How do you help them access these opportunities?
It's probably like a good Adam question.
I love this question, thank you. So a couple of the things that we're doing, because if it's just office space, people can get that other places, right? But the types of programming that run along with this and the types of spaces that are geared towards those people include, what we're doing with what we do through the co-lab. And we also have that top number 4 building there. We're looking at bringing together all the economic development agencies into one space so that the programming is there. As part of that space, we are planning an incubator space that would be able to have private offices that are basically at a rate that people could afford. as well as flex desk type spaces for people that are going to build things. And at the same time, they would have access to the other amenities and prototype labs and other things in the district. And so what we're doing is we have these different audience segments that we're trying to serve. It might be an existing business that wants to relocate here. It might be an entrepreneur that is underserved. They can't otherwise afford it, and finding ways to give them scholarship stipends or some other way for them to get in the space that they otherwise couldn't get. And so my role is identifying how we create something that's scaled up for each one of those audiences.
Yeah, I think one of the exciting things that comes out of OSU Cascades being a part of the larger OSU is there's a number of efforts from OSU main campus as a land grant institution to focus one portion of their mission on the development of some of these businesses and taking things through this pipeline of an idea or a concept at obviously a relatively collegiate level to how do you actually bring that into fruition in the private sector and take it to market, and these different levels of that movement through the process. And there's a number of pieces of that are focused over at the main campus, and I think we're looking to learn lessons from what has worked over there and what hasn't, and then also incorporate that into our innovation district. And there's different types of things like that. I think the main campus has a lot of focus on some engineering pieces and or some technology pieces, and that may or may not translate well here. We should think about how that fits the Central Oregon region and what aspects of that fit well here and which one we can learn from.
How do you make that decision? Who's guiding you into that?
I think, so far, we're having a working group with the main campus to understand what aspects of this first 6 buildings kind of align to the OSU Cascades programmatic and research goals, and also what align to the main campus programmatic and research goals. And then kind of taking that and the outcome from that, we'll start to get some feedback from the local community area to understand the Central Oregon community's essentially needs. As remember the first slide that Adam had, kind of looking at that big pie of what's happening in Central Oregon, where there's interest, where there's need for Central Oregon region.
And also the Innovation Hub work. So the Innovation Hub work will also have a needs assessment as part of it with an asset inventory. And the one thing that the state really wants to see as part of that is how we serve the underrepresented and underserved audiences. It's part of the mandate of that program. And so each year that we have an Innovation Hub here, we're going to be doing a needs assessment, and that will guide us to how we're going to help people and do it better. That's really.
Yeah.
My question is a little bit simple. I love everything that's going on here. And I love the idea of all the paths crisscrossing, but what about super old seniors who want to attend the Performing Arts Center? What is the status of the parking situation there? Because as much as we try to get away from cars, we're just not gonna be able to do it in my lifetime.
Yeah, I think the parking question is a great one. So we're required to have a number of parking spaces. So one, this is a parking lot here. And 2, we're required to have a number of parking spaces specifically associated with this innovation district. And so we're looking at having underground parking under a couple of these buildings with elevators.
Oh, that's great. Or shuttles even from, because where that parking lot is way up on the top there.
Yeah, and our existing parking lot is right here as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are, I'd say it's important to us to have the necessary parking nearby certain amenities on campus. We're trying to balance the, if I go back maybe a slide or 2, our big parking lot is up here by Simpson on top of landfill. That's like 360 stalls. We have 300 stalls right here today, so we have 660 stalls total today. We typically see about half to 3/4 full in the main lot and about a quarter to an eighth full on the other lot. The goal is generally to have folks who are in residence halls on campus, folks who drive here from, let's just say, Eastern Oregon. They stay in a residence hall, they park their car kind of up here, and maybe they're bicycling around campus, bicycling over to the Safeway to get groceries. But then also trying to have enough spaces that are relatively nearby the campus core so that the folks who commute from Redmond or Bend, who drive in and then take classes and then drive back, which we're seeing a good number of, like a third of our, I think it's more than a third of our students are the Central Oregon region, but those folks have some real nearby parking spots as well.
The on-campus parking spots for the students who come in from Redmond or Lapine or someplace else. What's going on Chandler? The parking, you know, you can barely get through that. I mean, I fly up and down there all the time, but are those people just in that parking building, or who are these
Yeah,
people?
we saw a pretty dramatic increase in parking along Chandler from when that parking building opened. And the city of Bend has Chandler open for parking all along it.
Do you charge, what do the students pay for parking permit to come onto campus? I think maybe, you know, if they have to pay, they're gonna park out on the street.
Yeah, it's
I don't know what
$1
it
a
is.
day.
It's de minimis. To give you context, when I was in law school, I paid $900 a semester, and then when I worked there in the summer, I paid $900 again. So
Yeah, no,
as a
I'm
student,
curious about that
Yes.
on-campus parking situation for the students. You know, do they have any way they can apply for some kind of a parking scholarship or something like that? Cause, you know, $1 a day doesn't sound like much to me or to you, but they're not gonna pay it.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
as a
so-
student, I was relatively thrifty, and I would look for any way to avoid paying $1,
Yeah.
right?
That's what.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't know if the student government body, I think, has a couple of those, so I do think
Yeah, I
they
don't think it
exist.
has anything to
but
do
it's-
with your innovation center.
Yeah, if
but-
not hundreds of spots, but parking's an important aspect of it, right? I mean, that's one of the things we've definitely received feedback from the community on, which is one of the reasons we tried to keep that cost of parking incredibly low.
Yeah, this-
We cannot make it zero, but we've definitely tried to keep it extremely low so that it's relatively easy for students to afford and be on campus.
Well, this question brings up another question that I have. Is you sound like you're very, very organized in terms of what you're going to have on campus. Do you have associations with the City of Bend, people that do the planning for the City of Bend or for Deschutes County in terms of what effect all of this is going to have on those places? Because it affects the schools, affects parking, affects a lot of places. I was with Purdue for many years, and there's a huge research park there now called Discovery Park.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed the city of West Lafayette tremendously over the time that I was there, and even more since I've been gone. I've been gone for about 30 years. But that's going to be a very huge place at Purdue, and I'm sure they've had to deal with the local politics in the area. I just wondered if you have connections or associations with them.
So as part of our master plan for the city, we needed to look at a transportation review of how our campus affects all the incoming roads and intersections. And so a number of the intersections that people probably complain about most at like Reed Market and Columbia, yeah, so there's 2 roundabouts we just added for Columbia Simpson and then Columbia, Colorado.
Yeah.
And then, so we just added those as part of that transportation mitigation plan. So because our campus, like those 2 roundabouts that you go through now all the time, there was construction there about 2 years ago, those roundabouts exist because of our campus. So like, we had to pay to put those roundabouts in. And that's part of our master plan agreement. So when we looked at how many trips all of these buildings would create, there's phases in here of when we turn different buildings on and different phases on, and there's different requirements for us to go build different mitigating items throughout the transportation. And so also the upgrades along Simpson that were kind of irritating for a little while, we had to do all that, put in new sidewalks along Simpson, and we had to go change the way Simpson flows, and then has to turn into our campus. So there's more of those to come as we build out the campus to mitigate those impacts. Yeah. Hopefully those intersections are kind of nice now, right? Sorry, you had a question?
And this may be a question for either one of you too. I was wondering about how you are, because it sounds like we need to have a lot of town halls. If you are going to meet with people at keep hearing you say, getting the community on board and finding out what they're thinking. So how are you facilitating that? And going forward, how are you facilitating marketing this whole thing to the city of Bend? For all those folks that are still complaining about the roads and the impact this is having because they don't know all this. We're all pretty impressed with this whole presentation. I'd like to be able to go on and send this whole thing to several friends and say, oh, you didn't see what I saw today. So, do you even have, can you direct us to like a link or something where we can send this on to other people? But how are you facilitating marketing?
So I'd say that right now there's a relatively passive communication plan with a lot of information on our website. But I think I would say throughout the course of the next year to 18 months, we'll be increasing some of that to have maybe those town halls you're discussing, reach out to stakeholders and community members and groups for some of that feedback. I'd say we're not in a place right now that we're ready for that, just we don't have enough information. We would be going to folks saying, tell us all about it, and they'd be talking about a broad number of things versus asking very specific questions that people can give us answers on on things that we can definitely change, right? So I think as we go through the next year to 18 months is probably when that outreach will really kind of ramp up.
And that said though too, one of the key things is that every step of this process, right? With the master planning, we had market soundings and we had Q&A sessions, a number of them with the community. And then we've done a number of consulting and studies and had work groups and stuff like that. But in last February, we held a market sounding about this plan that you're seeing. And then we held individual
Where our DPT, Doctor of Physical Therapy students are doing their internships and learning, and the public is coming in and using those spaces, right? That's just one instance, right? There's also a coffee shop with a barista who is one of our students on campus. There's also, you can just expand this out to a lot. There's an accounting firm or a civil engineering firm who are hiring mechanical engineering interns from the campus, but also occupying spaces, right? There's a number of places where there's an interesting overlap between the community and private partnerships, and then also the college. So affordable housing is one aspect of this, and then we're looking to grow that as well. And then there's different types of partner buildings that we're focusing on that have different types of uses, maybe more office or more biomedical focused, but trying to kind of group them generally, and maybe even having some OSU space in each of those buildings as well. So our students and faculty are located in each of these buildings. The Conference of Performing Arts. And so then you think about the different areas where we could see that overlap, right? Just kind of listing those out. And so then the different areas where we would focus for partnerships, thinking about our health and recreation building, partnering with somebody like Ben Parks and Rec, or somebody in the physical therapy region area. Like there's different types of partners out there who can help to occupy space in that building, who would get value out of occupying space, but then also help to run some of those spaces as well. This is where, I don't know, on the timeline, this gets back to your question, what does the timeline look like for this? So we'll be doing construction in that Innovation District area from a landfill remediation and civil engineering standpoint. So moving earth, putting in the roads, putting in the waterways, things like that, the water pipes. That will happen until about early to mid 2025. And so we'll be looking to set up perhaps either a public-private partnership or developer partnership with some folks who will come in and help us build those buildings. Then they'll probably lease those buildings out to either OSU or to the folks who will be in those buildings. And so those buildings probably won't start construction until like 2027 kind of time frame, 2026, depending on how those deals go, to be open in like 2028, 2029. So I think there's some, you kind of hear me using broad ranges of dates. There's a lot of flexibility in the timelines for those dates, depending on the pathways we go down. I think this is actually getting close to my last slide. So this is the question section. Yeah.
What's your financing? Is it all from OSU?
No, we're specifically, I'd say, trying to avoid using OSU financing. our mission is to do research and to educate students, and so using OSU financing and or OSU funds for that is something we're trying to avoid entirely. And so that's where we want to, our goal is to bring in an outside developer to pay for building those buildings, and they would lease them to the folks who are going to occupy those buildings. This is a relatively, say, common way to do something like this for other colleges around the country. We definitely build academic buildings with OSU funds. Those are probably the single place where we use OSU funds. More questions? Okay.
At the political level, the last time OSU Cascades went to the legislature for money for the next phase, there was quite a bit of blowback from people at Western Oregon and Eastern Oregon who don't have graduate programs. Has that been resolved, and will OSU Cascade have a full range of degrees eventually?
Yeah, as a portion of the main campus, we have a pathway to having doctorate programs. And we opened our first one, the Doctor of Physical Therapy, this last 2021. And so, yeah, what you're highlighting there is Western Oregon University and some legislatures in that area highlighted that some of those regional colleges are less than thrilled that OSU Cascades can do something like that as a part of OSU, but that they cannot. And I think that the outcome of that I saw was a bill was introduced that changed that outcome, that allowed them to also offer doctorate programs, and I believe that passed. I'm not a political genius, but I do believe that passed, and so that they, the pathway now to them being able to offer doctorate programs.